All right, good morning everyone. Welcome to Active Shooter, learning to recognize warning signs in the workplace. Let me just adjust a few things here and there. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that we're going to go over today is going to focus on the warning signs and what to look for in active shooter situations, or not really even active shooter situations, but when somebody is being hostile at work, and how to work with that and how to manage that. So I do have one question that I always like to open up with. The main reason is because I feel like does no justice to some of the people who are in class today if we don't ask this question. So has anybody ever been personally impacted by an active shooter or a workplace violence situation? Now, I'm going to launch this little question. It's going to show up on your screen. You'll see this little question pop up, and you can respond. So I've got a few people saying yes, and most saying no. If it's a yes, do me a favor, and in the questions area, just kind of type out what happened and what you did to for that conflict, or what happened to you with that conflict, in the little chat pod or the questions there. So I see 20% says yes, 80% says no. Would anybody like to share their experience with us? You don't have to. I don't want to force you to, but it's really nice to learn from these situations so we can all take some of this back. All right. Go ahead and close that out. So there's 18% said yes, 82% said no. Oh wow! So late at night, security guard had an issue and was waving his gun around. That is crazy. So were you out out in town? Were you I want to say clubbing, but were you out just eating, or at your office? Wow, that's pretty nuts. Did you? What happened with the situation? Did anybody end up calling law enforcement, or? Oh wow. Well, it's good on you for recognizing there was a problem. I think that's a pretty obvious one when somebody's waving a gun around. Did that person end up getting fired? So basically, she's saying that there was a security guard late at night that had an issue and was waving his gun around. It was at her office. She called law enforcement, and she thinks that he was hospitalized. Okay. That's a pretty tense situation. I'm glad that it resolved effectively and that nobody was hurt. Nobody was shot, right? Good. Okay. So preventing these incidents is key, and I applaud you on bringing that up in class, because we can talk about conflict resolution a little bit. We're not going to go huge into conflict resolution. What we're going to hit is the warning signs. We're going to look at some other warning signs of when people have weapons, and then we're going to look at how to de-escalate things in the workplace and how to deal with workplace conflicts. Okay, so we're going to talk really quickly about us, just brief snippet. We have over 50 years of combined training experience. We've been training different clients, and you can see a list down there of our clients, but each one of us has a different experience inside of the security realm. This is very, very important when we're talking about active shooter situations and active shooter mitigation or response, because in reality, you need people who are good at physical security. You need people who are good at conflict resolution. You need people who are good at understanding the psychology of active shooters, and that's what we bring to the table. Myself, I have 12 years active duty experience, 3 of which was law enforcement. 12 years of emergency medical experience. So I have a lot of experience in the realm of emergencies and how to respond to them and how to prepare and keep things from happening. So another question here. How many active shooter situations do you think have occurred this year in the United States? And you can just put this one in the questions pod or the little chat pod there. How many do you think has happened this year? Just throw out a ballpark number. It's okay if you're wrong. We're not looking for perfect answers here. We just want to see if you're aware. So John says 200. Another person says 500. So this year, 2017, Megan says 12. Would anybody else like to take a stab at this one? All right, no worries. Okay, so 42 total this year. These are just some of the areas that they occurred in. Miami seems to have 3 around that area this year. A few more in Texas, Los Angeles area. Now this doesn't represent exactly where they happened, just the geographical area. So 42. When you think about 42 situations, we think, well, I haven't heard of 42 situations. Well, the reality of it is media and what they cover. So in order to think about active shooter situations, you kind of have to define what's the criteria here. The criteria here is 4 deaths or injuries or more, okay? And so you can see right here on this map, you can see where each one of these have occurred. Now, when I was talking about media, media covers the ones that are controversial, the ones that happen in churches, schools, maybe even government buildings, but they don't cover every single one of them. A lot of the time they do it for views and for viewers and ratings. So there's good places out there on the web that you can find out information for these situations, and you can look at them and track what has happened in your state. Okay, so we're going to be talking about a subject that's a little bit more stressing in nature. So if this is going to be a problem, please let me know right now, okay? We're not going to show any videos today, but I do want to make sure that you're going to be okay with the material we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about shootings, we're going to talk about violence in the workplace, how it's caused. Okay. Okay, so looking at the problem, so this is where they occur. So in an FBI report from 2012, we saw that businesses were 40% of where active shooter situations occur. Schools are 29%. The biggest reason why this is because they are large areas, very little security, and they have a high population generally. So outdoors is 19%. So schools and business make up the majority of where active shooter situations occur. Now, active shooter situations typically last less than 15 minutes. They're generally over in less than 5 minutes. But if you think about law enforcement, how long it takes for them to get there, every single county and every single state has different response times. And the biggest thing to realize is that each one of these they go in response codes, basically. So what is the priority of the call? And each one of them have a different timing for how long it takes for law enforcement to arrive. But if the majority of them are over in less than 5 minutes, then we think, okay, is law enforcement getting there in 5 minutes? Sometimes yes, most of the time no. And that's why we talk about active shooter response and how to respond to active shooter situations, because in reality, you are the first responder. Okay, so looking at potential indicators, these are things that you can look at work, okay? So let's think about this for a little bit. I'm not going to read off everything, but I want you to identify a few that may impact you at work. So if somebody's being paranoid, okay, that's one of these on the list. These are just things you can look out for, and you can communicate up the chain, if you will, or you can communicate to your boss or their boss or to HR or to in-house security. So if you look at this, you can see that depression withdrawals in there. Decrease in attention to appearance or hygiene, that's another one. Now, I'm not saying that this is what's going to cause active shooter situations. What I'm saying here is that these are the things to look out for people who may commit violence in the workplace or violence in general, okay? So does any of these stand out to anyone? Have you seen any of this before, maybe even turn into a violent situation? Talk about previous incidents. Another one that most people don't realize is the guns. So people who may I'm just trying to think of this. So people who may commit some kind of violent act, some of them will have a huge hobby of guns. They'll be looking at gun magazines, watching gun shows, even doing YouTubes at work, watching people shoot and learning. What they're really trying to do here is they're trying to learn the methods behind shooting. It's been found that people who do commit violent acts will prepare weeks ahead of time, months ahead of time, by doing research. And this is an easy way to do research because it's all out there and it's all free, right? Another thing is we talked about noticeable decrease in attention to their appearance and their hygiene. This is huge. The reason why, think about it. So they're less concerned about the way they look and the way that their outward appearance, and they're more concerned with their plan and what's going on. Yes, this is going to be downloadable. Megan had asked that this presentation is going to be downloadable. We're going to be sending out, once you're done with the webinar today, you're going to get a recording. So everybody's going to get a link to that recording so you can watch it again. Now, specifically, this presentation is not going to be downloadable. So you can always reach out to me. I'll give you my email address afterwards, and we can talk about that if you want the PowerPoint itself. So when we talk about this, we also talk about precipitators. So what lead people to commit violent acts? Okay. Now, this isn't just a one of these is going to cause somebody to commit a violent act. It's more likely that they're going to have more than one of these going on at the time. So hostile conflicts at work, financial difficulties, legal problems, domestic problems. These are all things that can lead someone to commit a violent act. And when we look at this and we say, okay, there's usually some kind of snowball method behind this. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is usually somebody's going to start off with one of these, and that's going to lead to another one, and that's going to lead to another one. So let's think of a scenario here. I'll put myself in the spotlight. Let's just say I was having financial difficulties. I was having problems getting jobs or attaining jobs, okay? So I finally land a job, and I'm doing great, but let's just say I had a kid on the way or I had something going on. But on top of that, while I was at my job, I was having poor performance. And they were going to change me into a different role. Do you see how we're starting to talk about a few more of these things stacking upon themselves? So maybe you had financial problems in the beginning. Financial problems sometimes lead to legal problems, right? We know if we don't pay our bills that sometimes we have people trying to collect, and when we don't do the collection stuff, it will go to legal problems, okay? And then that could cause domestic problems at home. So wife, husband, doesn't really get what's going on. They're not really communicating their needs, which could also lead into influence of drugs and alcohol. So people, instead of coping with their stress and anxieties under normal mechanisms, they're resorting to drugs and alcohol. to cope with the problems and the stress of life. So when we talk about these, we talk about them snowballing and taking effect and more than one of these happening. So when you see these indicators, these are things you want to communicate. Now, backing up a little bit, when we talk about the indicators for potential violence and we talk about the precipitators of violence, and these can be in the workplace, they can be anywhere. What good does it do to know this stuff if you don't have a way to communicate it? Okay, we have to have a way to communicate this. This is huge. I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody talk about one of these and not take it higher than just themselves or their buddies or their friends. You have to be able to communicate this to HR, maybe to your in-house security, maybe to, if HR is not responding, maybe go higher than them. Who's higher than HR? Somebody's usually in charge of all of the employee experience or the HR experience, right? So if your manager's not helping or not going to communicate the problem further up or not going to deal with the problem, then you can go around that and go up. Every single workplace is going to have their own method for dealing with communication. Okay, the point is to know what that is, okay, or to have it in writing. If you don't have one right now, have it in writing. Okay, this is huge. The reason why is because how many people see a problem and never fix it because they're worried about backlash, they're worried about somebody finding out that they told somebody. The biggest thing here is that somebody needs to get help. Okay, we recognize one of these problems as somebody needing to get help. And if we recognize it and then report it, then more chances than not, you're going to fix the situation before it even occurs, before somebody even commits a violent act. And that's huge. That's what we have to be here for. We have to think about this. Most people wouldn't even be taking this webinar if you didn't have some concern or you didn't have some, or didn't want to know about how to communicate these or how to find out what's going on in the workplace and how to stop active shooter or violent acts from occurring in the first place. So have a plan. If work's not responding to that plan, you can go outside of work. You can go to the police department. You can even go to mental health agencies and you can talk to them about the problem or refer them. A police department is responsible for investigating. Now, this would fall in the realm of a wellness check, which wouldn't be the highest priorities, would be a lower priority, but it's still their job to respond to it and still take a report of this incident. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about concealed weapons. So there's a few different things that we can look at when it comes to spotting concealed weapons. And this is huge because we don't know if anybody is concealing a weapon around us. So oftentimes, we're going to get into some other interesting things, but oftentimes just the way that person walks could show that somebody is carrying a weapon. Typically, when you're concealing a weapon, if it's on one side or the other, you're going to have a shorter stride. The reason why is because they're trying to protect that gun and keep that weapon from falling out. Now, generally, when we talk about active shooter and violent acts, handguns are the primary. And the reason why they're the primary weapon is because they're more concealable. They're easily concealable. So a short stride on the gun side. That's one way to spot it. Another way to spot this is by what they're wearing, okay? So we know that clothes conceal weapons really well. Shirts, jackets, really baggy clothes really conceal it really well. So just looking at some of these aspects, like for example, if somebody is wearing a shirt but they have a concealed weapon right underneath inside of their shirt, if they're lifting their arm up, you might see a bulge under that area, okay? Or when somebody's wearing a suit, if they have a weapon, if they have it unbuttoned or if they're slouching down, you may be able to see the weapon. Also, if it's unbuttoned and they go to sit down, sometimes that weapon will cause the jacket to push itself backwards, okay? And that's another thing we can look at. Now, different situations will indicate concealed weapons as well. For example, running in the rain. Typically, people who conceal a weapon, when they're running in the rain, they're going to be holding the weapon. And this is for safety so it doesn't fall out. Now, if somebody is using a good holster, they shouldn't have to do that, but typically they will still grab their weapon just out of security. Also, rain could cause a silhouette, right? Rain could cause like a bulge to come out so you can see where the gun is. Other things like, for example, the weight of the weapon. If we think about the weight of the weapon, if somebody has it in a pocket, the weight of the weapon will pull down that side of the shirt. Okay, that's another thing. When people sit down, when people stand up, those are also good indicators that they're concealing a weapon. If somebody's sitting down or standing up, typically what they'll do is they'll grab the back of their shirt to cover up the weapon as they're sitting down or standing up. And that is another thing that we look at. Now, the reason why I bring up concealed weapons and how to spot a concealed weapons is if you just know a few of these, you can prevent situations from occurring, right? So let's just put this in perspective. We're at a movie theater. This person comes and sits 3 spaces away from us. And you notice that they grabbed the back of their shirt as they were sitting down. And you also notice a little bulge back there as he was sitting down, some sharp angle that is not naturally occurring in the body. What are your response? What are you going to do? If you notice this, what do? You're at a movie theater, you notice somebody has a weapon or you think they have a weapon, what are you going to do? Anyone? Well, what I would do is don't draw any attention to the situation, politely get up, maybe even say to somebody, hey, I gotta go get popcorn, I'm gonna go get a soda, I'm gonna go use the bathroom. And when you do that, go get somebody from the theater. Okay? So report the problem. And by doing that, not drawing attention to the situation, not talking to the person directly and saying, hey, do you have a gun? That's probably the worst thing you can do. Really what you want to do is say, hey, I'm going to go get a popcorn if you're with somebody, or look around, maybe get up, go get a popcorn, or go get a soda, and while you're in the process of doing something like that, or going to the bathroom, you go get management, or you go get somebody from the theater. And they usually are equipped with mechanisms to escort the person out, talk to the person, or a lot of theaters now have their own security. So we always see security walking around theaters and stuff like that. So just a few tips on concealed weapons. I want you to be able to take some of these away and be able to use them every day. Now, when we talk about workplace conflict, I want to talk to you about the 5 keys, the 5 different things we can do to deal with workplace conflict, okay? So generally in the workplace, conflict comes up because people have opposing views. Some people support one thing, some people support another thing, or they may not support the direction management wants to take. Well, that can cause a problem. Also, power struggles, people who want to be manager or are struggling to be a manager or struggling to be an effective manager sometimes may have some power struggles, ego, pride, jealousy. These are all things that can cause conflict in the workplace. Performance evaluations, we all get them every single year. Some people get them every quarter, right? These cause conflict as well, especially if we're all talking about what our performance was. Oh, well, I got a 5 in that area. Well, I got a 4 in that area. Or I got a 3 in that area. But why did you get a 4 when I got a 3? Like, what caused that? These are things that cause conflict in the workplace. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few of them, a few things to help you deal with that. First off, communication. It's huge. So if you can recognize what's going on in the situation, and you can recognize that there's a poor communication, poor information being relayed, there's no information, misinformation, this all can help the situation. Now, when we talk about communication, a lot of people think, well, if I'm talking, that's communication, or if I'm listening, that's communication. But are you? Are you actively listening? Are you actively involved in the conversation? Or are you just waiting to give your response? Okay? So a lot of conflict comes up because of communication. That's huge. As humans, we typically rely on communication for everything, right? And 70% of your communication is body language. So From this, I want you to try something next time, okay? I want you to try to listen to somebody and then respond back to what they said with a question, okay? So there's a gentleman out there, his name is Steve Covey. He wrote a really great book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the things you can pull from that, if you're worried about the communication, is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So understand what somebody's trying to say to you, not necessarily, even if you have a problem with what they're saying, seek first to find out what their situation is, their understanding of the situation and what their perspective is, and then convey your information to them. So if you understand what somebody's trying to say, then you're in a better position to talk back and to, well, not really talk back, but to respond back. Emotions. Emotions are another huge mistake in the workplace. Okay. Sometimes emotions can come from dating within the workplace. Some people often have that. You can also have other conflicts which lead to emotional decisions. Okay. So being overworked, people feel like sometimes they're undervalued, and undervalued, we typically let our emotions run wild here. And these are just mistakes that will lead to conflicts. Now, the reason why I talk about these is because I want to talk about what to do about it. Okay? So the first thing is define what your acceptable behavior is. Okay? So don't just assume something's going to be okay. Don't just assume that your behavior is okay or somebody else's behavior is okay. You really want to have a set guideline to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Okay? And this is what's going to help you avoid the conflict in the first place. Now, a lot of people don't like conflict, so they avoid it. They avoid it at all costs. Well, in some cases, that's really not the best way to handle conflict at all. Really, when you're dealing with conflict, you really want to, in order to prevent it, you really want to deal with the conflict itself. Don't avoid the conflict, deal with the conflict, okay? A lot of times we get into conflicts with other coworkers, we get into conflicts with our boss, but we won't really communicate what's going on. And the reason why is we don't want to deal with the conflict in the first place. Okay, some people will avoid it. Some people will flat out not even bring up their feelings or the way their emotions are because they don't want to deal with the conflict. Well, in the reality of it, we have to deal with conflict. Okay, the longer you wait, the worse the conflict can be. So deal with it, get it done with, and that will actually help you prevent it. Because one thing, and conflict can almost be like a snowball as well. One thing happens, you don't deal with that situation, then another thing happens and it compounds all of the problems going on. Now, when you do have a conflict and you are addressing a conflict, understanding what we call WIFM, okay, what is in it for me, is a huge thing. Why? Think about it. Just take a step backwards. When you're getting in a conflict with somebody and you're talking about a conflict or you're dealing with a conflict, think about what is in it for you. What are you getting from this conflict? Are you arguing for no reason? You have to think about why or what you're going to get out of the conflict that's going to drive just even the need to argue or anything like that. And really, when you're arguing, most people lose because they're in it to win. They want to win an argument. Take it from another side. What is in it for you? What are you going to get out of the argument? Is it worth your time in reality? That brings to the next one, pick your battles. So if you pick and choose when you bring up conflict or when conflict happens and what you're going to allow in the realm of conflict around you, pick and choose what you're going to battle against, okay? So thinking about the importance of it, is it important? Is it even important to argue about this? Is it even important to have this conflict? Example, somebody took the last pot of coffee. Maybe you have a Keurig at work and somebody took the last one. Is it really worth your time to sit there and argue about that? Maybe, maybe not. Okay? So think about that. The next thing is think of it as an opportunity. Okay? Now, conflict always brings up emotions, right? So every single conflict we have will lend something in the realm of teaching or learning opportunity. So if you have a conflict and you notice certain things about somebody or the way they display themselves, that could be a learning opportunity for you. There could also be other hidden factors in there. So you had a conflict about one thing, which could help you the next time you have a conflict about it. It's going to help you position yourself. Now, some people don't express themselves in the right manner when they're having conflicts, which is okay. Not everybody can express themselves, especially in stressful situations. But learning what happened the first time can help you the next time. And also, what can you pull out of this? What did you find out about violent acts and precipitators before? Maybe we can take these and use these as learning opportunities to learn about other people and to learn about why we need to do training in the first place. So, any questions so far about conflict in the workplace and how to avoid conflict? Nothing? Okay. So I'm going to go into a little bit about what we do and how some of the other things that we do here at Alamom. So really we say when we're talking about conflict and we're talking about active shooter and violent acts, we say that everybody should be prepared, okay? And that's really just starting off with the response and training, okay? So the essentials is just training. Well, to back the training up, you really have to have plans, right? So if you start with your layout, knowing where you are, knowing your building, knowing your security that you have in place right now, and you build plans to respond, you can effectively train people, okay? Now, there's other things that you can do, like you can do threat assessments, vulnerability assessments, so you can look at, okay, what's the threat? How would they enter my building? How would they come about? If somebody were to attack me, how would they do it? And you can look at all your security and your safety programs, and you can outline what improvements you can make. And this will help you, and then you can tie this back to your training, and you can tie it back to your plan. And when you do have a plan and you do have training in place, we always say it's important to drill the plan, right? When we drill a plan and we walk through each aspect of our plan and our training, we're able to pull back lessons learned, and we're able to see and identify, okay, this went wrong, let's fix it the next time. Let's put this part in place and see if that fixes it. And then we can re-drill and re-practice what we've learned. Also, when you deal with the body, and this is kind of another thing when we deal with conflict, knowing the fact that when you get into conflict, you're going to go into fight or flight. Everybody goes into fight or flight response at least once or twice a day. Now, you might say, John, I really haven't gone into fight or flight yet. Well, think about it. On your way to work, did you have to deal with a stressful situation? Did somebody cut you off in traffic? When you got to work or you got to the grocery store, did somebody take the last thing that you wanted? Oftentimes our body goes into fight or flight response so we don't even realize it. Now, the reason why I talk about fight or flight is it's important to know what your response is. And in reality, it's a fight, flight, or freeze. So when the adrenaline hits the brain, okay, your adrenal gland releases the adrenaline and it goes to the brain. When it hits the brain, your body goes into usually two or three things: fight, flight, or freeze. When you freeze, it's just a complete breakdown mentally and physically. You don't know what to do. You haven't prepared for the situation. Now, I talk about training and I talk about drilling, and I brought this up because when you do train and you do drill, you're more likely to have a response the next time that something happens. And God forbid that be something, a real situation. So if you've prepared for the situation, and the situation occurs, you're less likely to freeze or get injured because now you have a response. You can either fight or flee the situation, which is huge, okay? So there's other little things you can do. You can do specialty courses, which involves like your medicine and your response plan. You can also put response plan in there, okay? We talked about having a plan, but what do I mean by a plan? Well, a response plan. So having a response plan, how you are going to respond to the situations, and training your employees to respond to the situation. And that's what you're going to do in that training piece. Also, your recovery. How are you going to recover from a situation? If a violent situation does occur at work, how are you going to respond, and how are you going to recover from that situation? When you recover, you don't just think about, okay, if there is any injuries, what are you going to do? People are going to be out of work. So who do I call? And you really want to focus this around anybody can pick up this plan, right? And anybody can execute it, because maybe something happens to the executives, maybe something happens to management. So you really want anybody, the next in line, to be able to pick this up and execute the plan. So who is our staffing agency? Who is our building construction? Who is our cleanup? Okay, these are things that we can think about and put into our plan ahead of time. Also, specialty courses like medical courses. So if there is an active shooter situation or a violent act and we have responded effectively and there's injuries, how do we treat those injuries? And you can do basic first aid classes, CPR classes, but really just knowing the basics behind medicine can help you. Also, leadership. Leadership plays an important factor in any violent act. And the reason why is because most oftentimes people look towards leadership and management, or people who display themselves as a natural leader, to respond. They want to look at those people to know how to respond, because they may not have taken the time to train themselves. Okay, so leadership and management and people who are just natural born leaders have to be prepared and have to know what to do so that they can help lead others through situations like this. All right. Another big one, I've briefly touched on it, but risk assessments. That's another big one. So when you do a risk assessment, you're going out and you're looking at every aspect of your business, right? So you can also look at your training policies, your communication policies, and you can put these into effect, and you can write these, right? We take this risk assessment and you look at this, and this is a huge factor in writing your plan, okay? So knowing what your policies are right now, knowing what your building's like and your security's like, knowing what doors are locked, what doors are not locked, those are all important factors for putting into a response plan. So here's a few things that we do offer. We do an open enrollment, which we run twice a month right now. Feel free. They're always in different areas. We always do travel around to LA, Burbank. We do San Bernardino, we do San Diego, and you can come sit in these classes. And it's a 4-hour class, a 3-hour class, I should say. It's a 3-hour class where we talk about active shooter, and this is just a general content. So this general content can be broken down, and we can also take this content and mold it towards your organization. So look at your plans, look at your response, look at your training that you've already implemented, and just make this a better product for your employees. And the reality is that we just want people to be safe. We want people to be empowered to be able to respond to situations. There's private webinars. You can do a private webinar for your entire company, or you can break it out into 4 different sessions for the day. Okay, you can do private events where we come out and we teach. So we'll take your curriculum, we'll tailor it towards your business. We'll put in your plans, and we'll put in your building layout, and we'll talk to that, and we'll ask people what to do and where would they do if they're in this place or if they're in this place, or look at each aspect of your business and just plan and teach that to your employees. And there's also risk assessments. So we can come out and do a risk assessment for you, where we'll spend time with you looking over your plans, looking over your buildings, if there's more than one building, looking at different floors. So just because we've looked at the main part of the building doesn't mean we don't need to look at the top part of the building, because each part of the building could have different aspects of where people can get in. But we can also look at the plans. So look at your plan right now and help you adjust it. So up until this point, is there any questions, comments up until this point? Feel free to throw that in the little chat area. Thanks, John. Is there anything else that you guys feel strongly about or that you want information on? Got a little bit of time here. We can talk about a little bit of something else if we would like. Oh, you're welcome, Amanda. I'm glad that you came today.
You've met Amanda.
I have.
She was in San Bernardino.
Mm-hmm. Good. Glad you liked it. No, it's just 150 total right now. There's ways around that too. We have LinkedIn codes, and there's a couple other things you can talk with our team about. So we're gonna put in our email addresses. So my email address is jsowell@alamo.com. Okay.
There's a good question.
Oh, that is a good question. Okay, so Anna brought up, what are your thoughts about armed hospital security officers? Well, a lot of people, there's really mixed views on this. In reality, it's better to have somebody who's prepared to take action than not, right? We have that view, which generally if people are trained and they understand, and I'm not talking about they think they understand. I'm talking, do they understand the weapon? Do they understand situations? Do they understand hostile conflicts? In reality, it can be acceptable or unacceptable dependent on that. And they just have to know, having somebody armed is great because it'll stop the situation, right? A lot of times security officers have become ambassadors for our company, okay? Yeah, so in a hospital in particular, I've been at hospitals that have armed security before. It's really helped, but they have to understand when to use the weapon, okay? The force has to be directly proportional to the force being applied against them, okay? That's the biggest thing. So therefore, if somebody is just trying to get in a fist fight with somebody, right? That does not indicate that we should use a weapon. Okay, and it really goes against, it's really about policy and having policies in place for training. If people are trained and you do continual training, then yes, I would say, yeah, it'd be perfectly acceptable. But if you don't have continual policies and training in place, then no, it's not acceptable. Hopefully that answers your question. There's no straight answer for that question in my opinion. Because anybody with a weapon doesn't solve a problem. They have to be trained.
Karen had a security guard that was armed and caused a problem.
Yeah, so Karen in the beginning of class brought up that she had a security guard at her company who was armed, who had a problem. Now, a lot of that, we can look at different aspects of that, okay? If we do repeated background checks and we do mental health checks and we do training and we do have a positive plan, then yeah, it's a great thing. But if we don't, it can lead to problems, right?
It also depends if there's a mental health segment of that hospital.
Yeah.
People will commit suicide by a security officer or by a police officer as well.
And so Brandy's with me today. She's in the room on the other side. She was saying that it depends on the mental health aspect too. If the hospital has a mental health ward, that can present some problems, and people committing suicide or wanting to grab weapons and commit suicide, that could be a problem as well. So it's really, in reality, it's all about the business and the model in which you're going to have these weapons around.
It's really a complete place. There is no one solution.
Yeah. So complete plans, not just a one-stop shop solution. So having complete plans. Any other questions? Any other considerations or anything else you want to talk about or concerns? All right.
Yeah, next question. What are your thoughts on metal detectors in the ER?
They're great. I mean, they're a deterrence if they're used properly. I've been to a couple places that have metal detectors, and they've had in public situations and in medical situations where they did use them, and they just weren't on. They weren't used properly. They weren't calibrated correctly. In some aspects, they can be really great because you can, the people coming in, yeah, it will be, you got to think about this. People coming in is going to think it's an annoyance. Why do I have to go through a metal detector to get in? Okay. Do metal detectors stop everything? No, they don't. But do they prevent things from happening? Of course they do. Okay. If they're used properly. If they're used properly, great tool. They can help out. Or if you have security, and ERs are becoming a big place where people go for injuries, right? And with that can be other problems associated with those injuries, right? So having the metal detector there as just a deterrence factor can help save lives. But it's all about your plan and how you're going to use it.
It's like security cameras. If no one's looking at them, no one's monitoring them, it's useless.
And Brady says it's like security cameras. If nobody's looking at them and nobody's monitoring them, a metal detector can be just like that. So it's useless if nobody's monitoring them or looking at them. Any other concerns?
I'd have to tell Anna, the hospital's just like schools. The faculty and the staff has to be well trained. In the ER, you've got a 24-hour shift. There's people shifting in and out. They may not necessarily have situations, so it really takes the faculty being trained.
Mm-hmm. And Anna, did you catch that?
Probably not very loud.
The microphone picks up a lot in this room. So she was saying that it's a lot like school administrations. Just having people prepared and having people who are trained will really help out with each situation.
Because they have to put the patients first and teachers have to put the students first.
So just like a school, what she's saying is that teachers have to put the students first, and just like a hospital, the administration has to put the patients first.
So it's a different response.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you so much for attending today. I hope everybody got at least one thing they can pull out and take back to their workplaces and use every single day. We do continual webinars, so we do at least one webinar a month, sometimes two. So if you have a chance, join us again. We have your email after the class today and after we stop the recording. After the webinar shuts down, you should receive an email shortly with a link so you can share this with someone else.
You can also find it on the website under resources.
Yep, and if you go to the alamom.com website, so you go to www.alamom.com, under resources, you can find a lot of different videos and a lot of different webinars we've already hosted. All right, everybody, be safe, and the best of luck to everyone.